Good morning, everyone. Hello, my friends. Today we are here on this beautiful Sunday morning, August 5th, 2018, and we are in this beautiful summer day. Sky's blue, and you might hear some birds trickling up, as well as some lawnmowers. So I hope that you can still hear me well. If not, let me know, and I'll bring the computer inside. I always like outside because nature kind of inspires us to talk a little better and brings us ideas that sometimes in a closed office type space you don't have it. So I enjoy being outside very much. Anyway, today there was a one of the people that listens to Kardec Radio. She asked to speak about phobias and fears. And in her case, specifically, she has a fear of driving, that she would get stuck, she wouldn't go, and she wanted to know what that was all about. And of course, I wanted to open up this morning coffee for the soul with an invitation that you all, if you have any questions, it could be a psychological question, a spiritist, or a spiritual even question. I can do my research during the week, and we can certainly talk about it the following week. So this morning coffee for the soul will bring a little bit of the psychology of how things work, as well as the spiritual side of how things work. I'm no expert on any of them. I just enjoy studying them and pass it on to you. Anyway, so fear, by the way, some people ask, well, if you're no expert, why are you talking about it? I think we all have to talk about it. I think we all, and there's no need for you to be to have any master's degree in a certain topic for you to do some research and be able to understand a little bit that topic and to share with others. If we wait for the grandmasters to teach us, we'll be waiting for a long time. So it's nice to do our own research and to talk about it. And of course, I do have a degree in psychology as well. And I direct a Spiritist Center here in Newark, New Jersey. So I know a little bit about each topic. Okay, so here we are. We're going to talk about fear and phobias. Does anybody have or have heard of the word phobia? Most have. Phobias, a lot of times we say, oh, you have this phobia, you have this phobia. Or sometimes we talk about our own fears, which is a little different. We can be fearful of some of the things in life with a reasonable reason for being fearful. That is also a survival instinct. Okay, so we can see even on Kardec's codification talks a lot about if we do or harm somebody else or whatever it is to live, to defend our own lives. Because people ask, that's one of the questions that a lot of people ask. They say, well, if self-defense, if you kill someone in self-defense, how does that work? Anything that is in legitimate self-defense, it's an instinct of preservation of life. Thus, it is excusable. That's good for us to know, for us to not say, what do I do? I'm not supposed to kill, I'm not supposed to harm. Yet, what if my own life is at risk or some loved ones behind me? Do I have the right to defend myself, even if it's lethal force? At the present time in our lives, it's still an instinctual part of our being to do so. So it's interesting, and it's a perfectly expected response in this time in our lives. So same thing with fears then. It's expected for us to be fearful of some things. Anything that will put our lives in jeopardy, you can be fearful of. Some fears we are learning from maybe the wrong way of parenting. A lot of times parents will teach their children to be fearful of things that are perfectly not needed to be fearful, but because perhaps they have their own fears. But children do learn. We know that if a parent is very excitable on seeing a certain animal, or if a parent is very anxious, he can pass that anxiety to the child because the child does image their parents in a lot of ways. They copy a lot of their parents, including their emotions. So it's very interesting that we even copy emotions, not just behaviors. We'll see Alfred Bandura, in his exercises way back when on children's behavior, just by watching different behaviors, how they would behave similarly. But we know now that even emotionally, we start copying others' emotions. And that includes fear. So if you are someone that has fears, it's good to go back and study your parents' reactions to different things and see if this is unfounded fear that maybe you're just still, now it's back in your unconscious. You have no awareness of it. But if you start studying your own body and your own whys, why do I fear this? You might find that it has roots in your parents. Phobias, of course, and then fears, of course, has, again, different beginnings. It could be from a normal survival instinct. It could be taught by your parents. It could be learned by others. And it could be also from past lives, of course. And that's why we're going to even concentrate, because we're talking about spiritism and psychology. So we'll mix them both. So if you think about it, the fears that we have that are not just, I'm afraid of something or I feel uncomfortable with something, but I'm truly phobic of it. A phobic is an exaggerated, it's something that it really doesn't make sense. When you really look at it, it should not make sense. And we know that we're phobic. We know that we have that. And we can rationalize and we can think and say, there's no reason why I should be this fearful of closed spaces. But I am. But logically, I know that there's nothing really here that could cause me harm. But it's in us. So a phobia is absolutely an exaggerated sense of fear, many times unfounded. So why do we have these phobias? What does Spiritism say about this? Why can they be worked? Can our fears and our phobias? And maybe you have a specific phobia. If anybody wants to or feels like sharing theirs, it's okay, because it makes us also know that others feel the same way. And it's very important for us to feel and to understand that we're not alone in a lot of things. I do a group exercise. I do a group meeting every Saturday morning where we unite psychology and spirituality in my center. And it's wonderful when people come in and they share their own emotions or they share what they're going through. And immediately someone else will say, I thought I was alone, or I thought I was crazy, or I thought nobody else felt that way. Even for fears, there are some fears that people think they're completely crazy about it. The word definition, crazy, is very loose. So again, you have to see where the roots of your fears. A lot of times, psychoanalysis helps quite a bit, because it'll go all the way down, all the way to your childhood. It'll really dig deep into all the possible reasons that whatever the object of fear was at that time and was associated with your fear and became a phobia. So we know so many experiments, right? So many psychology experiments that we take an innocent object and we have an animal or a child or a person, and by you adding another factor, another variant to it, for example, a loud noise repeatedly, that child or animal will begin to feel fear for that innocent object, even without the noise after a while. And we do that. Sometimes fear is a product of trauma. Fear is a product of a catastrophe that has happened. And you will begin later on to develop a phobia, a lot of post-stress, right? The post-traumatic syndrome we have because of this association with something that happened that emotionally charged you, and it was associated with something that you saw, something that was happening, and afterwards, perhaps a plane that flies or a loud noise on TV or whatever it is will ignite that memory of that time. So we can work with this. Psychoanalysis is wonderful. Sometimes past life regression works for these fears. And I'm not talking about, I'm not a big fan of past life regression for anything. Some people use that for curiosity, but it should be a serious therapy. It should be a serious therapy for a very specific reason, not one of those open for all, because you're really digging into your unconscious. You're really digging into your past memories, your lives, and who knows, are you able to handle that? And would it be beneficial, or would it be beneficial to who's doing this therapy? And a lot of times people involve money into it. I personally do not like anything spiritual that you can do for others that you will do as a profession, because you become you're not subjective and you're not objective anymore. So again, phobias from the past. Now think about it. A lot of our phobias have no reasons to be in this present life. A lot of times we say, but I went through psychoanalysis. I've thought about my parents. I've had no traumatic episodes happen to me. There was no accidents with an association with my object of fear or a trauma or anything. Why do I still fear this? So we know that one of the biggest fears is death itself. A lot of times, if we look at our fears and or our phobias, and we keep digging back, it goes back to death. An example is claustrophobia. If you are afraid of closed spaces, if you really dig into it, it's not so much the closed spaces, but it's the fear of being without an escape, without a way out. And what would happen if you keep asking the person about their phobia? So what would happen if you couldn't get out? Oh, I would stop breathing and I would have a panic attack. And what would happen if you had a panic attack? Well, I would not breathe and I would feel ill and I would pass out. And what would happen if you passed out? Well, if I passed out and nobody helped me, I could die. So a lot of the fears goes back to its roots of the fear of death. So a fear of driving. What are you afraid of? Oh, I'm afraid of driving. But what would happen? Well, if I drive and I get into an accident, or I stop suddenly and somebody hits me, and what would happen if that would be the case? Well, I would get very hurt and end up in the hospital. And what would happen if that happened? Well, something awful could happen and I could die from my injuries. So again, a lot of the fears go back to the fear of death. And once we bring our knowledge of spiritism, and it's interesting, I had a doctor who said to someone that I love, and this person told me that he's not a spiritist, but he admired very much spiritists in a sense that not many spiritists will commit suicide. He said, I truly respect that aspect of your religion. He calls it a religion, which also is a religion. It's a way to connect us with God. So he said, because you believe truly that you live after death, and if you do commit suicide, that will bring very, very phallic consequences. And I admire that, because of all my patients, I have yet to see one that has attempted suicide, who is a true spiritist. So with our knowledge of spiritism, we can work our fears. We can work our phobias, knowing that God is good and just, and that every phobia, every fear we have is not a form of punishment, It is not because we are crazy. It is not because we deserve that, but it's a consequence of some action. Again, we talked about the things that could have happened here. It could be a consequence of a trauma, a consequence of parenting skills. It could be a consequence of an accident, an association. So once you free the object of association, then you free your fear. I'm very against these, perhaps the psychologists that promise to do away with your fear in 4 weeks, or do away with your fear with one session of this or that. It's something that varies very much from person to person. So pay attention to anybody that promises you anything in a timeline and it has to do with your psyche. It doesn't work that way. That's what I found. But things that have happened in a past life. Joana de Angelis, and we know Joana de Angelis is Divaldo Franco's mentor, one of his mentors. And Joana de Angelis is a person that has, I think of her as a very knowledgeable lady and a person that brings us especially a lot of knowledge on the psychology of, obviously, the science of the mind, of the behavior, of why people behave in a certain way. And she brings, in a case of phobias, past life events. I specifically like when she talks about, in her book, Personal Triumph, and she talks about how claustrophobia or agoraphobia and what usually it means that have happened in a past life, and you're still having that residual consequence in your unconscious. But that's for you to learn something about it, not as a mean of punishment. For an example of claustrophobia, the fear of closed spaces. Those who have true fears, phobias, of being in an elevator or being in a room so full of people that you can barely see an escape plan. Because again, it's more about having a way out than it is really about people touching you. Of course it is. I'm not saying that. But if we start digging, it becomes a fear of death. But claustrophobia, Joana de Angelis will say that most people that have that and some past life had been buried alive or had been in positions where they were left alone in closed quarters, perhaps in dungeons and different castles as prisoners, or they have been left in very small places where they couldn't truly stretch their bodies, or they have been buried underground and they were still, and perhaps they were in a cataleptic state. They were not truly dead and their minds were working and they knew what was happening. And so when you come back and you have a different life, you still will have these residuals. But it's for you to work what that has taught and what you should teach others about it. In a sense of agoraphobia that we see, many people think it's just the fear of open spaces. But it has more into it, especially the fear of being around others out without a way of escaping if something happens. People that usually have agoraphobia are very prepared for any eventualities. And they want to be safe. So the safety issue becomes such to an extent that they prefer to stay home and they prefer to stay in a place that they know it all. They know where everything is. There are no people that will be different variables for things to go wrong. Okay, so they avoid open social spaces. But Joana de Angelis will bring this as a possible product of those who have been tortured, criticized, hurt publicly. So if we go back to the times of the witch hunt and those who were burned at the stake, those who have really received a death sentence, and those were and everyone is cheering for that, or those who have been served as an example out in public without a way out, without an escape. And that, again, will bring in a post life that fear. I am in an open space, in a public space, and where I don't know if I have a way out. You see, she'll bring a lot of different illnesses. It's a tremendous book. That book has to be studied. Personal Triumph. It has everything with just about every single mental illness that we know. And it's explained in a spiritist sense, a spiritual sense, of course, in light of spiritism. So it's a very, very good book. And perhaps someday we can study it here. Who knows? Study each chapter about Personal Triumph. It's one of my favorite books. So again, all these fears, why would someone be fearful of public speaking? So perhaps in a past life, they have used their language for not so good things, who knows? And they had consequences because of that. They received a death sentence for sticking up for something. Whatever it may be, and if you're born with that fear, the healthy exercise to do is for you to use your fear for charitable ways. Now, what? I've never heard that before, right, Deb? Where are you coming from? Think about it. If you have the fear of public speaking, you have done psychoanalysis, you have done even, who knows, maybe past life regression, and you haven't reached the point where it all began, so you can work that point. Are you going to live the rest of your life with that agony without trying different things? And the way that works is, of course you should try. You should try. Sometimes we need medications for our phobias, of course. No one's saying that this is not a real medical condition. It is a medical condition. It is stated on a DSM, which is the book of disorders of the mind. Let's put it that way. But there are medications, there are many different types of therapy. There's even art therapy. But if we look on a spiritual level, if we turn around, when Jesus came and said, give the other face, show the other side of your face. So if you have a fear of public speaking, and all of a sudden you examine and you say, anything that's negative in my life, I know it's a product or consequence of something that I did. So if what is happening is not good, then it has to be a product or a consequence of something that I did and it was not good. Does it make any sense? Of course. Of course, as spiritists, we know that. We know there's the law of cause and effect. And that is a very just law. So if my fear of public speaking is affecting my life, and I'm not at the point where I can do a shock treatment and be thrown in front of 100 people and given a text to read or given a lecture to give, we don't have to go that far. But we can start using our public speaking to those who you will not be fearful, to an audience that truly needs it. What if you start using your language to help others? It could be as a 2 or 3 people group. Perhaps the homeless population. You may start sitting down with 2 people that are sitting on the streets that you have no knowledge of them and just talk to them. Of course, I'm not telling anyone here to put themselves in a dangerous position, to put themselves out there with people they don't know. Okay, Deb, you just did. That's not the way I'm trying to. I think we're all adults here. We know what I'm giving you guys here. So in a safe way, if you can start expressing yourself publicly to a different type of population in a good charitable way, that is a way where you will work your fear. Perhaps an animal that you have a fear of, and you start thinking about that animal with care, or you start to work with other similar animals. You start volunteering. I'm afraid of mice. Okay, well, perhaps you're not ready to see a mouse or to touch one, but if there is this fear of mice, we don't know what has happened in your past life, but perhaps you can volunteer in a place that has guinea pigs or bunnies or little animals where when they're born, they appear like a mouse. They look a little bit like it. And you can start giving the other face to the fear. So if I'm afraid of driving, perhaps I can take my bike and I can go bring food to my neighbor or to somebody else who needs it. And then I'll start with my car and I'll start driving to a place doing charitable work. So the thing is, use your fear, use your phobia to be an instrument of change, to be an instrument of, since perhaps I used my words in a bad way in a past life, it could be consequence of that. So if the fear is about speaking, I will start speaking good things to people who need to listen to what I have to say in a small scale. And little by little, I will start raising that scale. Some psychologists like the immersive treatment, the shock treatment, the others prefer gradual exposure. And if we think about it spiritually, everything is truly gradual. There is no hurry, but there is a need. So everything we need to change, we should do it. We shouldn't just wait for our next existence. We should start now. That is a duty we have, but we don't have to hurry it to the point where I'm going to perhaps even make my fear or anxiety even bigger. So again, I thank you all. I hope I spoke a little bit about fears and phobias, and I hope you seek down deep inside, what is your fears? And fears in the end is really the unknown. We always fear what we don't know. So when we start searching, when we start looking at people as just people, when I'm afraid of speaking to people and I realize that they're no better than I am, but they're also no worse than I am. They're just like people. Then when I get to know people, I become less fearful. When I understand that that animal could kill me or could not kill me, but if I understand the laws of death and dying and spirituality, then that animal, I can be cautious when the animal requires that, but I don't need to be fearful or even develop a phobia down the road. So that is what it is. When Jesus said no, knowledge will set you free. When Socrates said know thyself, everything is associated with getting to know yourself, others, animals, nature. So let's study, my friends. Let's observe. And that is really a path to freedom. Thank you for all who have been here in Morning Coffee for the Soul. And I'll be here next Sunday. Okay. You guys can always suggest, but I think next Sunday's topic will be hope. I have watched this past week a lecture from this neurosurgeon. Yes, he was a neurosurgeon, and it had everything to do with hope. And I think I can pass that on, what I learned from him. Chris is here with us. Hello, Chris. How you doing, my friend? Stella Ferreira saying hello from Brazil. Hi, Stella from Brazil. I don't know if it's cold there. I think it is, right? We have Marilda Vega saying hello. We have good morning, Marilda. We have Rosângela Lima saying good morning from São Paulo. Hey, my Brazilian friends in Brazil. Good. Teresa Castro. Hi, Teresa. How are you, my friend? And we have Karina Santos too. It is very early on a Sunday, usually 8:30. Most people are still kind of, sleeping. Time frame here, most places are behind. So especially California is about 5:30 in the morning. Most people watch this afterwards. So I will leave my blessings to you all. Ask you for your blessings, and I will see you all next Sunday. This usually goes posted in on Kardec Radio as well as the YouTube for Kardec Radio. Thank you for listening, my friends. Have a wonderful Sunday.